The big ship called New Horizon moved through space like a metal whale swimming in an endless dark ocean. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking at the screens that showed their new home getting bigger and bigger. Behind him, 50,000 people waited in sleeping pods and living areas, ready to start new lives on a planet they had never seen before. Jake had been flying ships for 20 years, but this felt different. These were not soldiers or workers going to do a job and come back home. These were families with children and old people and dreams of making something better. The planet ahead looked green and blue like Earth, but it was not Earth. It was theirs. Now, or so they hoped, Dr. Lisa Carter worked in the science lab 3 floors down from the bridge. She looked at all the readings from the planet and felt excited. The air was good to breathe, the water was clean, and there were no big dangerous animals. Plants grew everywhere, and the weather was nice. It was perfect for humans to live and grow food and raise children. Lisa thought about her own daughter, Amy, who was 7 years old and sleeping in the family area. Amy had asked her mother if there would be other kids to play with on the new planet. Lisa had smiled and said yes. There would be thousands of kids just like her. Amy had clapped her hands and said she wanted to plant flowers and catch bugs and swim in alien rivers. The ship landed in a big flat area near a river and some hills. Jake named the place Haven Colony because it felt safe and peaceful. The first thing they did was set up the big machines that would clean the air and make power. Then they put up the houses that had been folded small for the trip. In just 2 weeks, Haven Colony looked like a real town with streets and shops and a school. Sam Williams was 10 years old and he loved the new planet right away. He could run faster here because the gravity was lighter than Earth. He found rocks that glowed in the dark and flowers that sang when the wind blew through them. His best friend was Emma Davis, who was 8 and always laughed at his jokes even when they were not funny. Sam and Emma spent their days exploring with other kids, like Jake Garcia, who was 9 and loved to climb trees, and Beth Johnson, who was 11 and collected the singing flowers. Their parents worked hard building the colony, but the kids just played and learned and grew up under 2 suns that made every day feel like summer. The adults were happy too. Ben Thompson fixed the machines that broke down, and he loved how quiet everything was compared to the noisy cities on Earth. Maria Santos kept everyone safe, and she was glad there were no wars or crimes to worry about. The biggest problem they had was when someone lost their pet cat, or when the food machines made the bread taste funny. Dr. Carter made friends with the plants and animals. She found trees that grew fruit faster than any Earth plant, and grass that stayed green even when it did not rain for weeks. She sent reports back to Earth, telling them how wonderful everything was and how the children were healthy and happy. Captain Morrison walked through the streets of Haven Colony every morning and evening. He saw kids riding bikes and playing games in the parks. He saw families eating dinner together in their new homes. He saw old people sitting in gardens and young people falling in love. It made him feel proud that he had brought them all safely to this good place. Nobody knew that other aliens were watching them from space. Nobody knew that creatures called Zephyrians had been mining rocks in the south part of the planet for many years. The Zephyrians looked like big insects with 4 arms and silver skin. They flew ships that could dig deep holes and take out the special rocks they needed for their own worlds. High Merchant Vextar was the boss of the Zephyrian miners. When he heard about the humans landing on what he thought was his planet, he got very angry. The humans had not asked permission and they had not paid any money. Vexitar thought they were stealing from him just by breathing the air and drinking the water. 3 weeks after the humans landed, Dr. Carter was walking by the river when she saw something silver moving in the sky. A Zephyrian ship came down and landed near her. The door opened, and out came a creature that looked like a giant praying mantis wearing clothes made of metal. Carter was scared, but she was also excited. This was first contact with an alien species. She raised her hand and said hello in the most friendly voice she could make. The Zephyrian raised one of its four arms back and spoke in a voice that sounded like music mixed with static from a broken radio. Far away from the green planet where human children played and laughed, there was a place called Nexus Prime, where all the important aliens made decisions for the whole galaxy. The building where they met was made of crystal that reached up into the clouds and sparkled with lights from 1,000 different worlds. Ambassador Krelthos walked into the big meeting room on 6 legs that clicked against the crystal floor. He was from a race called the Hegemony, and he looked like a lizard that had learned to stand up and wear fancy clothes. His skin was dark green with gold patterns, and his eyes were yellow like a cat's eyes, but much bigger. Krelthos was angry about the humans on Kepler 442c, which was the real name of the planet the humans called home. He had talked to his friend High Merchant Vextar, who had told him all about these new creatures who had landed without asking and were now living where they should not be. The Galactic Council had members from 47 different species. Some looked like animals from Earth but bigger and smarter. Some were made of gas or light or crystal. Some were so strange that humans would not even recognize them as alive. But they all had one thing in common. They thought they knew better than everyone else. Council Prime Zaraneth floated in the center of the room inside a cage made of golden light. She was pure energy that had once been a living creature but had evolved beyond having a body. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once like thunder that could talk. Krelthos stood up and began to speak in the formal way that was required in the council chambers. He told them about the humans, who had taken land that belonged to the Zephyrian Trade Consortium. He said the humans were young and wild and did not understand civilized behavior. He said they needed to be taught a lesson before they caused more trouble. Most of the council members had never seen a human before. They had heard stories about Earth and how humans fought wars against each other and destroyed their own environment. The stories made humans sound dangerous and stupid. Krelthos made sure to remind everyone of these stories. The Eldaran delegate was a tall, thin creature that looked like a tree with arms and a face. The Eldarans were peaceful and did not like violence. Their delegate stood up and said maybe they should try talking to the humans first before making them leave their new home. Krelthos laughed in a way that sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. He said the Zephyrians had already tried talking and the humans had ignored them. He said humans only understood force, and that was the only way to deal with them. On Nexus Prime, in a smaller building near the Crystal Tower, Commander Alex Rodriguez sat in his office reading reports from Earth. He was the human ambassador to the Galactic Council, but most of the aliens treated him like he was not really there. Humans were new to the galaxy, and most species thought they would not last very long. Alex had been a soldier before he became a diplomat. He had fought in the water wars on Mars and the mining conflicts in the asteroid belt. He knew how to fight. But he also knew that fighting 47 alien species at once would be suicide for the human race. His secretary came in with a message that made his heart sink. The Galactic Council was voting on something called Resolution 7749, and it had to do with human colonists. Alex grabbed his uniform jacket and ran toward the Crystal Tower as fast as he could. By the time Alex got to the council chambers, the vote was almost over. He listened in horror as Zaraneth read the resolution out loud. All human colonists on Kepler 442c had 72 hours to pack up and leave the planet. If they did not leave, the Galactic Council would send ships to make them leave. Alex jumped up and asked to speak, but Krelthos said it was too late. The vote was 31 in favor, 15 against, and 1 abstention. The resolution had passed. The humans had to go whether they liked it or not. Zaraneth announced that the Hegemony would be responsible for enforcing the resolution. This meant that Krelthos and his people would be the ones flying the ships and pointing the guns at human families. Alex could see that the lizard-like alien was looking forward to it. Alex sent a message to Captain Morrison on Kepler 442c right away. He used the fastest communication system the humans had, but it would still take 6 hours for the message to reach the colony. He tried to think of something helpful to say, but what could he tell them? Pack up your whole life and leave the planet you love because aliens you have never met said you have to. The message Alex sent was simple and terrible. The Galactic Council says you have to leave Kepler 442c in 72 hours. If you do not leave, they will send warships to force you out. I am trying to find another way, but right now, you need to prepare for the worst. Alex spent the next day going from office to office in the Crystal Tower, trying to find someone who would help. The Eldarans said they were sorry, but they could not change the vote. The Crystalline Collective said it was a legal matter, and they did not get involved in legal matters. The Aquatic Federation said humans were land creatures, and not their problem. By the end of the day, Alex realized something terrible. The galaxy was full of species that had been pushed around by stronger species for thousands of years. When the hegemony said jump, everyone else asked how high. Nobody was going to help the humans because they were all too scared to stand up to the bullies. Alex sent another message to Captain Morrison. This time, he told him the truth. The galaxy does not care about us. We're on our own. Do what you think is right, and know that Earth will understand whatever choice you make. In the Crystal Tower, Krelthos smiled his lizard smile and began making plans for the human eviction. He had done this 43 times before with other species. It was always the same. The weak creatures would cry and beg, and then they would pack up and leave. In a few days, the humans would be gone, and the Zephyrians could go back to their mining. What Krelthos did not know was that humans were different from every other species he had bullied before. Humans had something that most galaxy species had lost long ago. They had the willingness to fight for their children even when fighting meant they would probably die. Captain Jake Morrison read the message from Commander Rodriguez 3 times before he could believe what it said. His hands shook as he held the data pad, and his face got red with anger. 72 hours to abandon everything they had built. 72 hours to destroy the dreams of 50,000 people who had traveled across the galaxy to find a new home. Jake called an emergency meeting in the main assembly hall where the colonists came for town meetings and celebrations. Dr. Lisa Carter arrived first, still wearing her lab coat covered in dirt from the alien plants she had been studying. Chief Engineer Ben Thompson came next, wiping grease off his hands from fixing the water purification system. Security Chief Maria Santos walked in last, her face already showing that she knew this was not going to be good news. Jake stood at the front of the hall and read the evacuation order out loud. When he finished, the room was so quiet you could hear the wind blowing through the ventilation system. Lisa was the first to speak, and her voice was shaking with anger. She said the Galactic Council could go straight to hell. She said she had spent 3 years studying this planet and preparing for colonization. She said her daughter Amy had finally made friends and started to feel at home. She said they were not leaving just because some alien bugs wanted them gone. Ben Thompson stood up and said his piece. He had built the power grid with his own hands. He had programmed the food systems and the air recyclers and the waste management plants. Everything in Haven Colony worked because he had made it work. He was not going to walk away and let it all rot just because aliens said so. Maria Santos had been a soldier before she became head of colony security. She had fought in 3 wars, and she knew what real danger looked like. She said the Galactic Council was trying to scare them with big words and fancy resolutions. She said if aliens wanted to fight, then they would get a fight. More colonists filed into the hall as word spread about the evacuation order. Parents came with their children. Old people came leaning on walking sticks. Young couples came holding hands. Everyone wanted to know what was happening to their new home. Jake looked out at all the faces in the crowd. He saw Sam Williams sitting with his parents, still wearing the muddy clothes from playing by the river. He saw Emma Davis holding her mother's hand and looking confused about why all the adults seemed so upset. He saw Jake Garcia and Beth Johnson and hundreds of other kids who had never known any home except Haven Colony. The vote was not even close. 48,000 colonists voted to stay and fight. Only 2,000 voted to leave, and most of those were old people who remembered wars from Earth and knew how bad things could get. Even most of the old people voted to stay because they said they were too tired to start over again somewhere else. Jake sent a message back to Commander Rodriguez and made sure to copy it to the Galactic Council and anyone else who might be listening. The message was short and simple. Haven Colony will not abandon our home. We came here in peace, and we have hurt no one. We will not leave just because you have decided our presence is inconvenient. If you want us gone, you will have to come and get us. War Commander Thaxmore received the human response while his fleet was still 2 days away from Kepler 442c. He was sitting in his command chair on the bridge of his flagship, a massive ship called the Iron Claw that could destroy a small moon if he wanted it to. Thaxmore was a hegemony warrior who had been fighting for 60 years. He had conquered 12 worlds and forced 37 species to surrender without firing a shot. He was 7 feet tall with muscles like steel cables and scars covering his arms and chest. His yellow eyes had seen 1,000 battles, and his claws had torn through enemy armor like paper. The human message made Thaxmore laugh. He had heard brave words from doomed enemies before. They always sounded tough until the shooting started. Then they cried and begged and offered to give him anything he wanted if he would just let them live. Thaxmore called his captains together for a war council. The 12 ships in his fleet carried enough firepower to glass the entire surface of Kepler 442c. The humans had one old colony ship with basic defensive systems. It would be like using a hammer to kill an ant. Captain Draktos of the war cruiser. Night Hunter said maybe they should just destroy the human ship from orbit and be done with it. Captain Velnora of the battle cruiser Stormbringer said that would be wasteful. Dead colonists could not be forced to work in Zephyrian mines. Thaxmore decided on a show of force. They would destroy a few non-essential buildings, and the humans would surrender immediately. He had done the same thing dozens of times before. Inferior species always folded when they saw the true power of the hegemony. Back on Kepler 442c, Ben Thompson worked day and night to turn Haven Colony into a fortress. He mounted mining lasers on the tallest buildings and rigged the power plant to overload if the aliens tried to capture it. He knew it would not be enough to stop a real military fleet, but maybe it would make the aliens think twice about attacking. Maria Santos organized the colonists into defense groups. She gave everyone jobs to do when the attack came. The children would go to the underground shelters that had been built for storms. The adults would man the few weapons they had and try to make the aliens pay for every inch of ground. Dr. Carter worked with the other scientists to hide all their research data. If the worst happened and the colony was destroyed, at least Earth would know what they had learned about this beautiful planet. She also made a special recording for her daughter Amy, telling her how much she loved her and how proud she was to be her mother. The children of Haven Colony did not really understand what was happening. Their parents tried to explain that bad aliens were coming and they might have to hide for a while, but it sounded like a game to most of the kids. Sam Williams and Emma Davis made plans for where they would hide and what snacks they would bring to make it more fun. On the last night before the hegemony fleet arrived, Captain Morrison walked through the streets of Haven Colony one more time. The two suns were setting and the singing flowers were starting their evening song. Children were being called in for dinner, and parents were tucking them into bed with stories about brave heroes and happy endings. Jake stopped at the school where Amy Carter was helping her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, put away the art supplies. Amy had painted a picture of her family standing in front of their house, with the two suns shining down and the singing flowers all around them. She asked Jake if he liked it, and he said it was the most beautiful picture he had ever seen. That night, Jake sent one last message to Earth and to every human ship in the galaxy. He told them what was about to happen on Kepler 442c. He told them that 50,000 humans were about to fight for their right to exist in a galaxy that did not want them. He told them that if Haven Colony fell, at least it would fall fighting. The message ended with words that would be remembered for centuries. We have children here. If you fire on this colony, you will be declaring war on every human in the galaxy. This is your only warning. War Commander Thaxmore stood on the bridge of the Iron Claw and looked down at the green and blue planet spinning slowly below his fleet. 12 hegemony warships hung in space like metal sharks waiting to feed. The planet looked so peaceful and quiet that Thaxmore almost felt sorry for the humans who thought they could stand against the might of the galaxy. Thaxmore had read the human captain's message about declaring war, and it made him laugh. Humans were so young and stupid that they did not understand how the galaxy really worked. The strong took what they wanted and the weak gave it to them, or died. That was the way it had always been, and the way it would always be. The War Commander opened a communication channel to Haven Colony and spoke in the voice he used for conquered enemies. He told Captain Morrison that he had 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures. He said the hegemony fleet would provide escort ships to take the humans to a refugee camp on a mining asteroid where they could work for food and shelter. Captain Morrison's reply came back immediately, and it was not what Thaxmore expected. Morrison said the humans would not leave their home and they would not work as slaves for aliens who had no right to be there. He said if Thaxmore wanted the planet, he would have to take it by force and deal with the consequences. Thaxmore had conquered 47 worlds, and he had never met a species this stubborn. Usually by now, the local leaders would be begging for mercy and offering to surrender. Instead, these humans were acting like they actually thought they could win a fight against a full battle fleet. The War Commander decided to teach the humans a lesson they would never forget. He ordered his gunners to target the colony's power grid and communication arrays. A few precision strikes would show the humans how helpless they really were. Once their lights went out and they could not call for help, they would see reason. Down on the surface of Kepler 442c, alarm sirens wailed through the streets of Haven Colony. Parents grabbed their children and ran for the underground shelters that Ben Thompson had prepared. Sam Williams held tight to his mother's hand as they hurried down the metal stairs into the darkness below ground. Emma Davis clutched her favorite stuffed animal and tried not to cry as explosions lit up the sky above them. The first plasma bolt from the Iron Claw hit the main power station and turned it into a ball of fire and melted metal. The lights went out all over Haven Colony and emergency generators kicked in with a low humming sound. The second bolt destroyed the big communication dish that connected the colony to the rest of the galaxy. Maria Santos stood in the colony's command center, watching her defense screens flicker and die one by one. The mining lasers Ben had mounted on the buildings fired back at the hegemony ships, but their beams scattered harmlessly against military-grade shields. It was like throwing rocks at a tank. Dr. Carter was in the underground medical center treating people who had been hurt in the first 2 explosions. Most of the injuries were minor cuts and burns from flying debris, but she knew it would get much worse if the bombardment continued. She kept thinking about her daughter Amy, who was in the children's shelter 3 levels down. Thaxmore watched the explosions bloom like flowers on the planet's surface and felt satisfied with his work. The humans would surrender now that they understood how outmatched they were. He ordered his communications officer to hail the colony and demand immediate surrender, but Captain Morrison's voice came back as strong as ever. He said the humans were still there and still fighting. He said Thaxmore could destroy every building in Haven Colony, but the colonists would never give up their home. He said the children of Haven Colony would grow up free, or they would not grow up at all. The War Commander felt his temper rising like lava in a volcano. No inferior species had ever defied him for this long. He ordered his gunners to target the colony's administrative buildings and make it clear that continued resistance would only bring more destruction. The third plasma bolt hit the town hall, where the colonists had voted to stay and fight. The building collapsed in a shower of concrete and twisted metal. The fourth bolt was aimed at the colony's main warehouse, but something went wrong with the targeting computer. Atmospheric interference from the planet's magnetic field made the beam bend slightly as it descended through the sky. Instead of hitting the warehouse, the plasma bolt struck Haven Colony Elementary School. The school was supposed to be empty, because all the children were in the underground shelters. But 10-year-old Sam Williams had left his backpack in his classroom, and it had his lucky rock from Earth inside it. He had snuck out of the shelter to get it, because he thought the lucky rock would protect his family from the bad aliens. 8-year-old Emma Davis had followed Sam, because she did not want him to go alone. 9-year-old Jake Garcia had followed Emma because he had a crush on her and wanted to be brave. 11-year-old Beth Johnson had followed all of them because someone had to be the responsible one and make sure they got back safely. 14 other children were in the school for different reasons. Some had forgotten toys or homework or pictures of their families. Some had gotten scared in the dark shelters and wanted to find their parents. Some had just wanted to see what was happening outside. The plasma bolt hit the school's main building and vaporized the west wing instantly. The rest of the structure collapsed like a house of cards as support beams melted and walls crumbled. 18 children died in the first few seconds when the roof came down. The ones who survived were trapped under tons of burning rubble. Dr. Carter was the first adult to reach the destroyed school. She could hear children screaming and crying somewhere under the wreckage. She started pulling chunks of concrete away with her bare hands until her fingers bled. Other colonists arrived and formed human chains to move the heavier pieces. They found Jake Garcia first. He was unconscious and his left arm was bent at an impossible angle, but he was breathing. They found Beth Johnson next, crying for her mother and covered in dust but mostly unhurt. Then they found Emma Davis under a fallen beam, her leg crushed, but her eyes still bright with hope. Sam Williams was the last one they pulled out alive. Half his body was burned, and he could barely whisper when Dr. Carter leaned down to hear what he was trying to say. He said he was sorry for leaving the shelter, and he hoped his lucky rock was okay. Then he closed his eyes and stopped breathing. Captain Morrison stood in the ruins of the school and counted the small bodies laid out under white sheets. 14 children dead and 9 more who might not live through the night. The boy Sam Williams, who had loved exploring the planet so much. The girl Emma Davis, who had always been kind to everyone. Kids who had been playing and laughing just a few hours ago. Morrison opened a communication channel to the hegemony fleet, and his voice was different now. It was quiet and cold, and full of something that made experienced soldiers take a step back. He said the aliens had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He said they had killed human children, and now they would pay a price beyond their imagination. Thaxmore heard the human captain's words and felt confused. It had been an accident. The plasma bolt had gone off target due to atmospheric interference. These things happened in war, and the humans should understand that. He tried to explain that the hegemony had not intended to harm civilians, but Morrison cut off the communication. The war commander shrugged his massive shoulders and went back to planning his attack. Humans were emotional creatures who did not think logically. Once they finished crying over their dead younglings, they would see that resistance was hopeless and surrender like everyone else did. What Thaxmore did not know was that humans were different from every species the hegemony had ever conquered. Most galactic races had evolved past the primitive instincts that made parents die for their children. Humans had not evolved past anything. They were still the same creatures who had fought saber-toothed tigers with pointed sticks to protect their young. Captain Morrison sent one final message to Earth and every human settlement in the galaxy. The message was only 5 words long, but it would change the course of galactic history forever. The message said, "They killed our children. Come now." Admiral Kate Phillips was drinking her morning coffee in her office at Solar Defense Command when the message from Kepler 442c arrived. She read it 3 times before the words really sank in. They killed our children. Come now. 5 simple words that made her hands shake and her heart pound like a war drum in her chest. Kate had been a military officer for 30 years. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and rebels on Mars. She had seen friends die in battle, and she had killed enemies with her own hands when she had to. But reading about dead children in a bombed school made her feel something she had never felt before. It was rage so pure and hot that it burned away everything else. Admiral Phillips activated the emergency communication system that could reach every human ship in known space. Her message went out to cargo haulers carrying supplies between the outer colonies, to passenger liners full of tourists, to mining ships working in the deep asteroid fields, to exploration vessels mapping new star systems, and to every military ship in the Terran Navy. The message was broadcast on all frequencies with the highest priority code the human military had. Code Black meant that the survival of the human species was at stake. It meant that every human everywhere had to drop whatever they were doing and help fight for their people. The message said, "Children down on Kepler 442c. All vessels converge immediately." We go to war. Captain Danny Rodriguez of the cargo ship Big Dreams was hauling grain to the Mars colonies when he received the Code Black alert. Danny had a 6-year-old daughter named Lucy who loved to draw pictures of spaceships and aliens. When he read about the dead children on Kepler 442c, he thought about Lucy and what he would do to anyone who hurt her. Danny changed course immediately and headed for Kepler 442c, even though his ship was not built for fighting. He sent a message to his wife on Mars, telling her he might not come home, but he had to do this for all the children who could not defend themselves. Then he started thinking about ways to turn grain containers into weapons. Dr. Richard Stone worked at the Xenopsychology Institute on Earth, where he studied how alien minds worked. He got the Code Black message while he was writing a report about hegemony military tactics. Richard understood aliens better than almost any human alive, and he knew exactly what was happening on Kepler 442c. Richard sent an urgent message to Admiral Phillips explaining what she was dealing with. He said the hegemony thought humans were just another weak species that would fold under pressure. He said most galactic races had lost the instinct to protect their young because it was not logical or efficient. He said humans were about to teach the galaxy a lesson about what happened when someone hurt their children. Commander Alex Rodriguez on Nexus Prime felt like his world was falling apart when he heard about the bombing of Haven Colony Elementary School. He had tried so hard to find a peaceful solution, but now 14 human children were dead, and the galaxy was about to see what humans really looked like when they were angry. Alex sent messages to every human embassy and trade mission in galactic space. He told them to prepare for war and to remember that they might be the only humans left alive if this went badly. Then he packed his emergency kit and prepared to evacuate before the shooting started. On Earth, families gathered around their televisions and computer screens to watch the news reports about Kepler 442c. Parents held their children closer and thought about what they would do if aliens ever threatened their families. Young people who had never thought about joining the military started looking up recruitment centers. Old people who remembered the last time humans had to fight for survival began digging their old uniforms out of storage. The first human ships to reach Kepler 442c were the fast attack boats from the Outer System Patrol. These small ships were designed to chase smugglers and pirates, but their captains pushed them harder than they had ever been pushed before. The crews worked around the clock to install extra weapons and ammunition that would let them fight military-grade warships. Captain Sarah Wilson of the patrol boat Lightning Strike arrived first and immediately attacked the hegemony picket ships on the edge of the star system. Her little ship was like a mosquito attacking an elephant, but she kept firing her missiles and laser cannons until the bigger alien ships had to pay attention to her. War Commander Thaxamore watched more and more human ships dropping out of hyperspace and felt confused. Where were they all coming from? The humans were supposed to be a small, weak species with only a few dozen ships. But his sensors were showing hundreds of contacts and more arriving every hour. Thaxmore tried to open communications with the human fleet to offer terms for surrender. Instead, he got a message from Admiral Phillips, who had arrived on the battleship. Righteous fury. She told him that he had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. She said every human in the galaxy was coming to Kepler 442c, and they were all coming to kill hegemony soldiers. The alien commander laughed and said the humans were bluffing. His 12 ships could destroy 100 human vessels without taking serious damage. Admiral Phillips told him he would find out soon enough what humans were capable of when their children had been murdered. By the end of the first day, over 300 human ships had arrived at Kepler 4422c, colony ships that had been converted into assault transports, cargo haulers with missile pods welded to their hulls, passenger liners carrying volunteer soldiers armed with hunting rifles and mining equipment, even luxury yachts whose rich owners had bought military-grade weapons on the black market. Danny Rodriguez and his grain ship Big Dreams arrived on the second day. He had turned his cargo containers into giant shotgun shells filled with metal pellets and chemical explosives. When he fired them at hegemony ships, they spread out like a cloud of deadly rain that could punch through armor plating. Dr. Stone arrived on a research vessel that had been studying black holes. The ship's crew had figured out how to use their gravity sensors as weapons that could crush enemy ships like tin cans. The first time they used it on a hegemony cruiser, the alien ship folded in half and exploded in a ball of fire. By the third day, over 800 human ships surrounded Kepler 442c like an angry swarm of metal wasps. Thaxmore realized he was not dealing with a normal military operation. This was something else entirely. This was an entire species that had decided to fight to the death for their young. The war commander sent a message to the Hegemony High Command requesting immediate reinforcements. He said the human response was far beyond anything in their tactical databases. He said the humans were acting like they did not care if they lived or died as long as they could kill the aliens who had hurt their children. Hegemony High Command sent back a message telling Thaxmore to stop being dramatic and finish the job. They said humans were primitives who could be defeated easily once he stopped letting them intimidate him. They said to destroy a few dozen human ships and the rest would run away like all the other species did. Thaxmore looked at his tactical display showing hundreds of human contacts moving into attack formation and knew that High Command did not understand what was happening. The humans were not trying to win a conventional battle. They were trying to tear his fleet apart with their bare hands, and they did not care how many of them died doing it. Admiral Phillips sent one final message to the hegemony fleet before the battle began. She said the aliens had 72 hours to surrender and turn over everyone responsible for the school bombing. She said if they refused, every hegemony soldier in the system would die, and their ships would be turned into scrap metal. Thaxmore sent back a message saying the hegemony did not negotiate with inferior species. Admiral Phillips smiled a cold smile and gave the order that 800 human captains had been waiting to hear. She said, "All ships, weapons free. Kill them all." The Battle of Kepler 442c began at exactly 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time when Admiral Phillips gave the attack order. 800 human ships moved toward 12 hegemony warships, like a pack of wolves surrounding a herd of buffalo. War Commander Thaxmore had fought many battles, but he had never seen anything like what happened next. The humans did not fight like any military force Thaxmore had ever faced. They did not try to preserve their ships or minimize casualties or follow any logical tactical doctrine. They flew straight at the hegemony fleet and kept firing until their ships exploded or the aliens were dead. Captain Danny Rodriguez in his converted grain hauler rammed his ship into the side of a hegemony cruiser and detonated his cargo hold when he could not break through their shields. The cargo ship, Big Dreams, and the alien cruiser Bone Crusher died together in a ball of fire that lit up space for 1,000 kilometers. But before Danny died, his improvised weapons had torn holes in the cruiser's armor, and 20 other human ships poured laser fire through the gaps until the alien ship broke apart like a rotten log. Dr. Stone and his research vessel used their gravity weapons to grab hegemony fighters and crush them into balls of twisted metal. When the aliens tried to target his ship, a dozen human cargo haulers moved in front of him and took the hits so he could keep fighting. The humans were fighting like they were one giant organism with 800 different bodies. Thaxmore watched, his fleet getting torn apart by creatures that should have been easy to defeat. His ships had better armor and bigger guns and more advanced technology than anything the humans possessed. But the humans had something the hegemony had forgotten: how to use. They had the willingness to die for something more important than their own lives. The heavy cruiser Iron Talon tried to retreat when it lost its main engines to a swarm of human attack boats. Captain Wilson of the Lightning Strike led 50 small ships in a coordinated assault that stripped away the cruiser's weapons one by one. When the alien ship finally surrendered, Wilson told them that surrender was not an option for child killers. Admiral Phillips commanded the battle from the bridge of the Righteous Fury, but she was really just coordinating 800 individual captains who were all fighting their own personal wars. Every human in the fleet was thinking about the 14 dead children in the bombed school. Every human was imagining their own sons and daughters lying under white sheets in the rubble. The hegemony battlecruiser Night Hunter lasted longer than any other alien ship because it had the heaviest armor and the most powerful shields. But human ships kept ramming into it and exploding until its defenses finally failed. When the Night Hunter's hull cracked open, 50 human vessels poured fire into the breach until the alien ship's reactor overloaded and turned the cruiser into a miniature star. Thaxmore's flagship Iron Claw was the last hegemony ship still fighting, after 16 hours of continuous battle. The war commander had lost 11 ships and thousands of soldiers, but he refused to surrender because the hegemony code said death was better than defeat. He kept firing his remaining weapons at human ships and watched them explode one after another. But for every human ship that died, 2 more took its place. The humans seemed to have an endless supply of vessels and an endless willingness to sacrifice them. Thaxmore finally understood that he was not fighting a normal battle. He was fighting an entire species that had gone insane with grief and rage. The same. Ironclaw's shields failed when a human passenger liner loaded with explosives rammed into the flagship's main battery. The liner, Peaceful Journey, had been carrying families to a vacation resort when the code Black Alert arrived. The captain had turned around immediately and spent 3 days converting his ship into a giant bomb. Admiral Phillips herself led the final assault on the Iron Claw. The Righteous Fury and 20 other human warships surrounded the damaged flagship and pounded it with everything they had. Thaxmore tried to send a surrender message, but Phillips cut off his communications and kept firing until the alien ship was nothing but glowing debris. When the battle was over, not a single hegemony ship remained intact. 12,000 alien soldiers were dead, and their fleet was scattered across space in pieces too small to identify. The humans had lost over 200 ships and 15,000 people, but they felt like they had won the most important victory in human history. Admiral Phillips did not stop with the destruction of Thaxmore's fleet. She sent messages to every human ship in the galaxy telling them to converge on hegemony space. If the aliens wanted to kill human children, then humanity would show them what real war looked like. The humans were going to take apart the hegemony piece by piece until nothing was left. The hegemony High Command tried to organize a defense when they heard about the disaster at Kepler 442c, but they discovered something terrible. Human fleets were appearing everywhere at once, attacking hegemony colonies and military bases across dozens of star systems. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a weapon pointed at the aliens who had hurt their children. On Nexus Prime, Commander Alex Rodriguez stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council and delivered an ultimatum that changed galactic politics forever. He said humanity was done asking for permission and done begging for recognition. From now on, any species that harmed human children would face the full wrath of humanity, regardless of consequences. The council chamber was silent as Alex explained what they were really dealing with. He said humans were not like other galactic species who had evolved beyond their primitive instincts. He said humans would burn down the entire galaxy if that was what it took to protect their young. He said the death of 14 children on Kepler 442c had awakened something in humanity that could not be put back to sleep. Council Prime Zaraneth floated in her cage of golden light and admitted that the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. She said they had not understood what humans were capable of when their children were threatened. She proposed an immediate treaty that would give humans complete protection under galactic law. The vote was unanimous. Every species in the Council agreed to the Terran Protection Accord that made attacks on human settlements a crime against the galaxy itself. But Alex knew the real protection would not come from treaties or laws. It would come from the memory of what happened to the hegemony when they crossed the line. Within 6 months, the hegemony empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was completely destroyed. Human fleets had systematically dismantled every military installation and orbital platform the aliens possessed. The surviving hegemony worlds were isolated and defenseless, their people reduced to farming and crafting like they had done before they learned to build starships. Dr. Carter returned to the ruins of Haven Colony Elementary School and planted a garden where the building had stood. She put up small markers for each of the 14 children who had died, including Sam Williams and Emma Davis, who had been her daughter's best friends. The markers were surrounded by singing flowers from all over the planet, and some from worlds the humans had never seen before. Alien species from across the galaxy sent flowers and gifts to the memorial garden. Not because they were forced to, but because they finally understood what humans really were. They were a species that loved their children so much they would fight the entire universe to protect them. It was a love so fierce and pure that it scared every other intelligent race in the galaxy. The garden became a place of pilgrimage where aliens came to pay their respects and remember the lesson of Kepler 442c. Above the entrance, Dr. Carter put up a simple sign that could be read in 1,000 different languages. It said, "Here lie the children whose deaths taught the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed." Captain Morrison rebuilt Haven Colony bigger and better than before. Families returned to their homes, and children played in the same parks, where Sam and Emma had once laughed and explored. The colony grew and prospered under the protection of a galaxy that now understood the price of threatening human children. But the real monument to the dead children was not made of stone or metal. It was written in the stars themselves, in the wreckage of hegemony ships, and the fearful whispers of alien diplomats. It was the knowledge that humanity had been tested in the fires of grief and rage, and had emerged as something the galaxy had never seen before. The first rule of the galaxy became simple and absolute. Never attack human children. Because humans do not forgive and they do not forget, and they love their young more than they love their own lives. That lesson was written in blood and starfire across 100 worlds, and every species in the galaxy learned it by heart.